Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. On the 29th of July, we've got a smorgasbord of content from right across Africa, from the sale of a racetrack in Johannesburg, or more accurately, just outside Johannesburg, all the way north to Cairo. All that and plenty more is coming up. Here's a preview. Reining in tax evaders, we'll be looking at the strategy of sharing accounting information. South Africa's metal workers are back to work after a 4-week strike, and we're looking at the price they paid. And an upcountry coffee brand in Ghana is taking on imported brands with quite a bit of success. Let's start in South Africa. The country's unemployment rate went up to 25.5% in the second quarter of 2014 from 25.2% in the first. According to those disappointing numbers from Statistics South Africa, roughly 5.154 million people were without work in the second quarter. That's up from about 5 million in the previous 3 months. The number of people who stopped looking for work, that also went up to 35.6% in the second quarter. The country is facing a string of economic challenges, the worst of those being continuous industrial action in the mining sector. Work stoppages at various mines and a fairly low appetite for precious metals by developed economies has cost South Africa billions of dollars in lost revenue. Its manufacturing sector is also contracting. The sector as a whole lost about 93,000 jobs in the second quarter compared to the same period last year. Now, speaking of metal workers in South Africa, they're slowly getting back to work after accepting a wage deal from employers, ending a 4-week industrial action in the metal sector. Now, the National Union of Metal Workers accepted a 10% annual pay rise fixed for 3 years for its lowest paid workers on Monday, and they put pen to paper on that deal today. The strike by over 220,000 NUMSA members had essentially stopped production at automakers and disrupted construction of new power plants in a country that's facing critical electricity shortages. The engineering firm Bell Equipment and construction company Group 5 also confirmed that most of their workers reported for duty. General Motors South Africa said it expects to run at normal production levels from Wednesday onwards.
With our own democratic processes, we don't take strike of workers unless workers in a general meeting are saying we want to go on a strike. That's our ballot. It has got nothing to do with government. They must be busy creating jobs instead of trying to manage the contradiction. They must give us a national minimum wage. That's their duty. Workers will not strike.
So then, what does this all mean from a wider macroeconomic perspective for South Africa? Let's find out. Angela Coppola is live in Johannesburg right now. Angela, let's get into the nitty-gritty details of this particular wage deal. NUMSA and 5 other unions have a deal with CIFSA, but there's still about 10,000 other employers with whom there's no agreement. What happens from this point on?
Well, the new buzzword that's hit the presses today is something called a lockout. It's been bandied about by NIASA from the beginning of the strike. Their CEO, Gerald Papenfuss, says he's unclear how many of his members are going to install or insist on this lockout continuing, but essentially some of the members might, and I'm talking about the employers here now, might decide to go back into production. That's the smaller guys, because they can't afford to keep their doors closed any longer. So it's likely that if they do start working or start bringing staff back on board, they might have to adhere to that NUMSA deal that was signed earlier this afternoon. If they stay closed, and a lot of them probably will do, they are going to try and force NUMSA back to the negotiating table, because that's what NIASA is after. They want to negotiate directly with NUMSA. And the issue is that production at the moment is not going to continue at an SME level. So while the bigger players have signed the deal and they'll start working, the smaller players haven't yet. Rahman?
Indeed. What's pointing out over here is, of course, that NIASA, which you refer to there as the National Employers Association of South Africa. Angelo, are there any circumstances legally under which these holdout employers under NIASA could be compelled by law to adopt the same wage deal that CIFSA agreed to with NUMSA?
Yes, there definitely is. There is a process. The Minister of Labour can force what they call an extension of the agreement to include non-signatories. Now, we've been told today that that's not a simple process. In the last strike in this sector, There was also a lockout that happened. That was in 2011, and it took the Minister of Labour at that point 4 months to get that contract extension to cover the other party, which also was NIASA. But NIASA promised that they're going to be watching this process like a hawk, because it has to go through the bargaining council. And the bargaining council, according to Mr. Papenfuss, is known to be a bit light when it comes to compliance. So NIASA and Papenfuss have said that they're going to be watching it like a hawk to make sure that it's followed due process. NIASA have also indicated that they will consider going to the Labour Court to get a ruling to stop the minister from trying to force them to agree to this deal, including their members. Rahman?
Indeed, and in the meantime, the job losses do continue. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, unfortunately, but that's CCTV's Angela Cooper there live in Johannesburg. Let's move on to North Africa, where residents of Libya's capital of Tripoli are facing fuel and cooking gas shortages as political and security chaos mar the oil-rich producer. Most gas stations have been closed since fighting erupted between rival militias who have exchanged artillery and rocket fire in a battle over the airport at Libya's capital. Hundreds of cars have been left for days in huge lines at completely different petrol stations right across Tripoli. The National Oil Corporation said in a statement that the gasoline crisis was mainly a security issue and not caused by lack of supply. In the meantime, Libya's oil production fell again last week. The National Oil Corporation said on Monday that production had been at 450,000 barrels a day, and that's down from 555,000, partly because the El Feel oil field had reduced output due to the clashes that were taking place in Tripoli.
The holidays are here and people want to enjoy Eid, but they cannot. They want to go out and shop for Eid, but they don't have one drop of petrol.
Petrol is available, but it's the way citizens are dealing with it. When people fill their cars, they fill up for 4, 5, 6 or even 7 days. There's no need to fill up containers and store them at home, which puts families in danger. Let the crisis pass because there's petrol. Libya is the world's third largest producer of petrol, so how is it possible not to have petrol? If it is short on petrol, then it's because of someone's creation.
We provide protection without any problems. The force protecting the station can come, but there will be gunfire. You know, it's not a secret. Everyone has bullets at home. We don't want anyone to get killed at the station. Some people sabotage the process by breaking the fuel pipes, blocking the barriers, or breaking their gas meters.
Let's move on to the question of taxes, or more specifically, the problem of getting information on individuals who engage in tax avoidance and evasion. Now, if the OECD is to be believed, we're one step closer to cracking that problem, given its release of proposed standards for automatic sharing of financial accounting data. Now, that draft was released on the 21st of July. It essentially proposes that government share a wide variety of financial data, everything from account balances, who owns those accounts, how much interest they're earning, dividend payments that flow to those accounts, and this affects any account held by an individual, companies, trusts and foundations. However, critics say a lot more needs to be done. Global Financial Integrity, for example, expressed disappointment that the data will only be shared among tax authorities. Now, over 60 countries have publicly committed themselves to implementing the standard, but only one of them is African, and that is South Africa. So then, taxes, usually a fairly complex topic. Why should you care about anything the OECD says, especially if you're in Africa? Let's find out. Xavier Mumbers with the East African Tax Justice Network is with me in studio right now. Thank you for your time this evening.
It's a pleasure.
GFI identified 3 main issues with the draft that came out of the OECD. Let's start with the question of privacy. Where do you draw the line between the public's need to know about people who are engaging in tax evasion and an individual's rights to privacy?
Well, I think we have to look at it from this standpoint. In spite of the fact that most of these companies and individuals who are involved in these financial transactions are private entities themselves, but the impact of their financial activities do affect everybody. It's of public interest. As the financial crisis, the past 2 financial crises showed, that a lot of this was due to the inability for companies to be regulated due to privacy. So I think the financial information and the right to that being made transparent is a public
So in essence, we're trying to swing the needle back here from an excessive focus on privacy to balancing it between the need for privacy and public interest as well.
Yes, exactly. It's about protecting the public good, even with private actors' actions themselves.
Right, but looking across most of sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of these countries, like Kenya, for example, we've been talking about a data protection bill for years and years and years, and we still don't have it. And a lot of sub-Saharan African countries also don't have a data protection bill. Won't this be a hindrance to actually getting these standards embedded in law across Africa?
Well, that's the real challenge in terms of implementing the new proposed standard of countries sharing information. But there are ways around it. So, for example, some of the proposals that most of us have been arguing for is that instead of making the global standard reciprocal, meaning instead of making it compulsory that each country, including African countries, have to provide the same quality of data in the same manner as the rest of the developed world, there are ways you can do it by maybe requiring less reciprocity. So you do it on a phase-by-phase basis. So depending on the capacity of each country, especially African countries, whose real challenge is obviously the capacity, both the technical and administrative capacity to process and generate this information, but you can scale this on a case-by-case basis.
Does it surprise you that, given the fact that African countries lose so much money, billions, according to some studies done by GFI, that only South Africa has committed itself publicly to adopting this standard?
Yes, I mean, the final aim is that we hope to have a multilateral standard that can be signed on by as many of the countries in the world as possible. But it's quite understandable why South Africa will be one of the pioneers, because South Africa is quite advanced in terms of its capacity. If you look at the revenue authorities in South Africa, it's one of the most advanced revenue authority. But also I think the OECD needs to make sure that the current standard is giving enough motivation for less developed countries, especially African countries. So we hope in the future that changes can be made to the standard so it's made easier for even African countries to sign up to it.
Right, final question for you, and allow me to play the devil's advocate here. A lot of sub-Saharan African governments don't effectively spend the taxes that they do get. So from that perspective, if you're an honest taxpayer, but you keep giving your money to a government that doesn't spend it properly, you don't have roads, you don't have water, your electricity access is still a mess. I mean, there's a philosophical argument that could be made that paying more taxes would essentially amount to throwing good money after bad, and therefore in that kind of context, tax avoidance, the legal sort, would essentially be a valid thing. Does this make your work harder, especially as far as getting these particular standards adopted?
Absolutely not. I think the case is the opposite. It's for the very reason that there is lack of social services that we need to encourage governments to collect more taxes. The truth of the matter, and there's enough data to prove that, is that out of all the money that is lost in Africa, only a small portion of it can be attributed to corruption or looting by private individuals. At least 60% of it is due to the business practices of multinational companies through transfer pricing and all those kinds of tax avoidance schemes. Therefore, there is a whole area that can be exploited where more money can be gotten to provide those kinds of services that currently governments can't afford to provide because there's simply not enough money. Even if we're to stop corruption and looting, we still continue to suffer from this outflow because the bulk of the money coming out of Africa is due to the business transactions.
Things like trade misinvoicing of commodities and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So it's about really focusing the energy on the most important areas that can make the most impact. And there are low-hanging fruits that we can work with. So if countries like Kenya, for example, closing tax loopholes by not giving tax incentives, being careful about double tax agreements, for example, in terms of companies that are dealing with tax havens. So there are simple things that can be done now before we even go to the much more complicated areas.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. But Mr. Mumba, thank you very much for your time this evening.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We've been talking to Sylvia Mumba there from the East African Tax Justice Network. Let's make a quick run through the markets here for you. It's a dry day as far as market data is concerned. A lot of those markets are closed fundamentally because, of course, it's Eid, several holidays right across the board. South Africa, however, very interesting data. We're still cracking on to those multi-year highs as far as the JSE is concerned. The thing to remember, however, is that economic data. Unemployment rate simply going up again. 25.5% was the number in the second quarter. When you come back, we'll be looking at the house price shocker that meets most Ethiopians when they move to the city. And motor fans rejoice! Porsche has come to the rescue of Kyalami. We'll have the details when we come back. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies.
From small businesses to large-scale enterprises, hear directly from entrepreneurs behind the story. It's about putting you in the picture so you know where Africa fits in the global context.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
Welcome back. Having a home of your own, it's a dream for many families across the world, probably yours too. And those in Ethiopia, well, it's pretty much the same for them. The thing is though, housing shortages are making residents there susceptible to very steep hikes in rental prices, and the price of many new homes are only affordable to the elite and the well-connected. Ethiopia's government is working on ways of alleviating the problem, but every day citizens keep asking, will it be enough? CCTV's Jitu Abraham was in Ethiopia recently. She has the details in What's Hot Tonight.
With a fast-growing urban community, about 17 million of the country's 92 million people live in the big city, and Addis Ababa is expecting this number to keep climbing. But what does that mean for residents? Well, many say that urban growth means higher rent and limited housing options. One homeowner shared with me his challenges in renting his last home.
When I go to the first time, 2,000 birr I paid. Okay. But every 3 months, 200, 300 birr, I become 3,000 birr. I live that house 1 year and 7 months. So within that 1 year and 7 months, 1,000 birr, the increase.
Regular rent increases and unfair practices by some landlords in Ethiopia make it hard for the average Ethiopian to afford their home. Those with top jobs or family abroad are amongst a small group with the possibility of transitioning from renter to homeowner.
In a rental place, the rent raises every month. Living in your own place, you can live with confidence. Your kids can have security.
This security comes with a huge price tag. According to the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa, a new cheap condominium built by a formal developer is about $70,000. It's an unbelievable figure considering that 66% of the country's population lives on less than $2 a day. The situation is made even more unfair when we consider developers' terms. New homes must be paid in full before moving in. This usually gives a family just 2 years to come up with the cash. And with the average university graduate making between $200 and $250 per month, pulling this money together without financial assistance can take a lifetime. Social media gives us a glimpse into how people feel. Balu G posts, unless the diaspora stops or reduces money transfers, there will be no reasonable prices in this country. I wish one day a job in the U.S. for every Ethiopian. While not a job in the U.S., new homeowner Alamayu is employed by an international organization. His position with them has afforded him a home loan from the company, something he knows he's lucky to get.
Maybe few people they will get the chance, this type of chance to get a loan.
Mortgage systems in Ethiopia are virtually non-existent, making home ownership for families an even harder dream to realize. The government has been working on ways to ease this burden. Recently, the city administration inaugurated about 22,000 condominium homes at a total cost of $4 billion. The homes were sold prior to construction via a lottery system. Those who won the lottery were able to buy a home at a discounted price, but availability was limited and also required payment in full. The government has about 73,000 more discounted condominiums in the pipelines, hoping to give families in Ethiopia a chance at some of life's simple pleasures. Jitu Abraham, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Porsche South Africa is the proud new owner of the iconic Kyalami racetrack. The track went under the hammer last week amid worry that property developers were going to snap it up and turn it into a real estate, development instead of actually keeping it as a place where petrolheads can go and have fun. But racing fans breathed a sigh of relief as Porsche came to the rescue. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more.
It was the biggest single lot auction in South Africa when the internationally acclaimed Kyalami racetrack went under the hammer.
Sold, ladies and gentlemen, at 205 to the 10 right inside. Give them a round of applause.
Porsche South Africa won the bid at $20.5 million.
As it stands at the moment, I think it's gone to the right body. They're going to keep it as a track. I believe they may develop around the track, which will enhance the value for the owners. But the bottom line is that it will remain as Kyalami.
Some would say that this is a second lifeline for this famed racetrack. After being built back in 1961, Kyalami hosted 21 Formula One Grand Prix races up until 1985. But then political sanctions brought all racing here to a grinding halt. Finally, an end to apartheid in South Africa brought this track back to life in the 90s. South Africa hosted another F1 race in 1993 on its return to the international sporting arena, bringing Formula One greats such as Michael Schumacher and the late Ayrton Senna onto home soil.
It's part of South African history. It's well known throughout the world as a Grand Prix track. It accords with Grand Prix standards. And it's really become very close to my heart and very close to anyone involved in motor racing.
In more recent years, Kyalami has hosted 4 World Superbike Series races and an A1 Grand Prix. But since then, Kyalami has battled to reclaim its glory as one of the fastest tracks in the world. While the track is still lucrative, funding for big events has been hard to come by.
There's only so many days racing that you can do in a year. There are annual events that happen once a year, for example. Even if you had a Formula One Grand Prix, that happens once a year if you manage to secure it. So the income from a racing point of view is capped.
The 72-hectare property is situated in one of South Africa's fastest developing areas, with average house prices at around $550,000. The track is now mainly used for corporate functions and events by local car companies.
We do host a lot of motor car companies in doing launching of new vehicles. We host driving academies such as Volkswagen Driving Academy, Mercedes-Benz, Land Rover. We do photo shoots here, and there are a few local race events that are hosted here.
Of the 19 races in the Formula One Championship every year, most of them take place in countries with the highest GDPs in the world. These include Monaco, Malaysia and Singapore. A country needs at least $27 million in race hosting fees. All proceeds except that of ticket sales go to the F1 group and does not stay in the host country. For South Africa, it is simply unaffordable. Sumitra Nadu, CCTV, Kyalami Racetrack.
Well done, Porsche. Let's move on to commodity prices here for you. Gold prices, of course, pulling back slightly. The Fed is meeting today, and that's part, of course, of the reason why. Gold prices were down. Well, spot gold was down slightly. We're seeing a slight recovery coming up later on in aftermarket trading. Cocoa essentially still hovering around the 3-year highs that we've seen in the last couple of trading sessions. Still fairly strong, 31.44 per metric ton. Global business still continues. When we come back, we'll be looking at an upcountry coffee brand in Ghana. It's taking on imported brands with quite a bit of success. We'll be back with that next. Welcome back. You're watching Global Business Africa from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Let's move on to Ghana now, where the country's only locally owned coffee firm is proving to be a big hit with consumers. The Upcountry Coffee Company has recently sealed a distribution deal with a major supermarket chain. Its founders say the problem now is making sure there's enough coffee to meet demand. CCTV's Katerina Vitozzi has this story that makes our grassroots segment tonight.
Coffee beans, dried, hulled and sorted, ready for roasting. Ellis Noble and Kumra does that job for the Upcountry Coffee Company. Today he's roasting around 4 kilograms of Ghanaian grown beans at their processing site just outside Accra.
The beans we are working with now is a Robusta coffee beans, and it is coming from the Volta region of Ghana. Okay.
After 20 minutes on the roaster, the beans need to be quickly cooled before they are ground and packaged into 250-gram bags for sale in Ghana. Upcountry has been making and selling ground gourmet coffee as well as the whole beans for the past 2 years. Production is still only small scale and all done by hand. But it's that dedication which has helped Upcountry become the only 100% made in Ghana coffee company.
Well, I see us as the premier coffee company in Ghana, the forerunners, the leaders, and a lot of people will come, and there's enough room, I suppose. The market's probably big enough. It's just whether there's enough coffee to support the more than one company. Right now, it looks like there's not really enough coffee.
Ghana's coffee industry collapsed back in the 90s. Nowadays, growers often get better prices for their beans across the border in Togo. So the challenge remains how to get enough high-quality raw material to meet growing demand, and then how to process it on a large scale.
Our story in Ghana and many other African countries as well is that we don't process enough of the raw materials that we can find here, right? So it makes us dependent on a lot of, few sets of products that we can export in the raw shape. And my views obviously is that, we cannot grow as rapidly as we should as a country until we can start manufacturing and we can start processing some of the things that can easily be found here.
Upcountry coffee is now sold by a major Ghanaian supermarket chain. On the shelf, its competitors are from other African countries as well as from Europe. But does the fact that this coffee has a Made in Ghana label make it more popular amongst customers?
I don't mind if it has a sticker, Made in Ghana sticker, I don't mind. I just go for quality and that's it.
I'll choose Ghana-made product because I'm proud of my country's product. And I believe we'll produce the best product too.
The Ghanaian government believes increasing Ghana-made products is a key way to reducing the country's reliance on imports. But to get there, business leaders say more support and better infrastructure is needed for the country's farmers and manufacturers. Katerina Vitozzi, CCTV, Accra, Ghana.
Quick run through the currencies here for you. Some of the gold weakness that we saw before, of course, the Fed statement tomorrow showing up here on the currencies as well. The rand was slightly lower, down about 0.38 in earlier trading. Also keep an eye on the Kenyan shilling. It's going to be fairly tight, supported by liquidity conditions, more or less fairly tight this week. Now, just before we go, here's a sneak preview of what you can expect here tomorrow. Kenya's biggest bank by number of accounts, Equity, will be announcing its half-year results on Wednesday. The bank has also been allowed to venture into the communication space by getting a license to issue mobile phone SIM cards for its banking products. Barclays also will have its half-year numbers at around noon, give or take. It's down about 2%. We'll also be looking at the ease of doing business in Ethiopia after the Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn, reportedly faulted the World Bank's latest report, which indicated the country had slipped in the rankings. So then, plenty more to look forward to on Global Business tomorrow. We'll see you then. Do send your feedback on today's program and pretty much anything you see on the line on this program to Global Business Africa at cctv.com. We're also on social media, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. If you're there, so are we. We'll see you there. Thank you for watching. I'm Raman Yan.